Thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Secure Connections podcast. This exclusively channel-focused series is brought to you by IOTSA, the Internet of Things Security Services Association. As always, I'm your host, Brian Sherman, Content Director for Get Channeled. And joining me for today's episode is Rob Rae, VP of Business Development for Datto. Rob is not only one of the most traveled channel professionals I know, but one of the strongest advocates of the managed services and IT channel community. And we really appreciate him taking time to share his insight on security, managed services, and other channel-related topics. So welcome back to the Secure Connections podcast, Rob.
Very happy to be here, Brian. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, we're lucky to have you join us so soon after DattoCon 2018. And I assume the event prep and execution consumed most of your waking hours over the past couple of months, as well as your teams. But all the reports coming out of the conference were extremely positive. It truly sounds like Austin was a rocking place.
Austin is a phenomenal city, and to be honest, it really wasn't that much effort. Putting on a party for 2,100, 2,000, 2,200 people. Not that big of a deal. But no, we did. I mean, it obviously requires a ton of planning. You got to deliver great content. You got to deliver great venue. Then you got to think about food and booze, and you got to think about all the different things that kind of make conferences stand out and unique. And at the same time, it's a huge appreciation, kind of a big thank you for our partners as well. So it's not just education, learning, and sharing. It's also, we want to party a little bit. So factoring on all those things into a conference for that many people is really, really hard. And yeah, I'm very proud of my team. I think we did a phenomenal job. So thank you for recognizing that.
Yeah, and a couple of things too. There were at least reported over 1,900 MSP partners and hundreds of channel professionals in attendance. So that makes it, it may be arguable, but one of the top 5 conferences in the channel. I'm not trying to be overly promotional, but I know that Datto is very. And today's discussion, I want to be more about the community. You brought together a lot of elements I want to talk about today that aren't promoting Datto's products, but are more talking about the community you developed and some of the underlying issues that your team is helping to address that benefit everybody in here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It just quickly, it was 1,600. I don't want to overinflate it because too many vendors do that.
Gotcha.
It definitely was. We had just over, I think it was 1,612 or 1,613 MSPs in attendance. And then when you add in the staff and all the other vendors that were there, it got to about 2,100 people, just under 2,100 people total. So all MSP focused, all MSP related. Yeah, but I would agree with you. It's definitely become the largest, if not one of the largest, open ecosystem MSP conferences in the world. So
excellent. And we appreciate you taking time today to share some of the news. And we want to talk about some of the security trends and the conversations coming out of DattoCon 2018 with the listeners today. So we appreciate your time with that. And for correcting the numbers too. Those were taken right out of the channel press. So I'll be happy to share where they came from afterwards. we can out a few people on that one, but yeah, best intentions. But either way, it's still an awesome accomplishment. But so my first question coming after that is: are you catching up on your sleep yet?
Actually, I am, but it was exhausting, and it's funny because we spend so much time and energy and effort, and I always tell my team, we're putting this on for the partners, and we were rehearsing till 1 a.m. just making sure everything was going to execute the next day flawlessly, and to a certain extent it did. And then I tell them on the Wednesday night, which is when we do our big after party, then they can chill, they can have a few drinks, they can relax, they're kind of off the clock. But by that point, 8 o'clock rolls around, we're so bloody tired that we just can't, we can't hang. So it takes a few days, but I think we're recovered now, and I'm actually going to take as soon as I'm done this podcast, I'm on vacation, so I'm looking forward to that.
Well, we doubly appreciate your time then. But yeah, I think a lot of people who've been to channel events, I think, start to understand what those that put it on and host it go through, because there's a lot that goes in it. And if they don't, they should spend a little more time kind of asking and seeing what goes on behind the scenes. But kudos to them. But I found a few interesting stats from the press coverage of the event. And again, I'm going to blame them if any of these numbers are wrong. So you can, but it said that Datto's MSPs serve more than 500,000 small and medium-sized businesses in 132 countries, protecting 440 plus petabytes of data. I mean, that last figure represents a huge
Mm-hmm.
responsibility for you and your partners. I
Mm-hmm.
know it's a shared responsibility. But with the continual rise in cyber attacks, how does Datto ensure all that critical business info is securely locked away, yet accessible, to those that need it? Because it's one thing to lock it down, but when they're trying to restore a business after a disaster or the loss of data, they need it then and now. How do you work all of those things behind the scenes?
I think it's a couple different things. First of all, your stats are correct. Those numbers are bang on, and those numbers are growing. It's funny because we actually had those numbers in our decks, DattoCon, and we start working on our decks a few months ahead of time. And every time we open the deck, we had to update those numbers because of how fast that growth actually is. It's phenomenal, and that's a reflection of the size and the growth in the managed services space for sure.
Right.
How do we manage it? Well, I think there's a couple of different things that kind of factor into this. I think, first of all, the fact that we actually started this at 0 petabytes, the fact that we actually, that we built our first device, sold the first device, and serviced the first device, and then kind of we as an organization have been scaling as our partner base has been scaling. So we remember the days when we had under a petabyte of data in our cloud, and we're crazy excited when we hit that first petabyte. Now we're at 441 plus in our data centers around the world. So it's a matter that we've kind of grown with it. So you kind of as a result, it's not like a tidal wave that kind of hits you. It's kind of this wave that we've all been riding the entire time, and it's getting bigger and bigger. But as it's been getting bigger and bigger, we've been on top of it and not so scary. So I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is it's the maturity of our development and our engineers. And this happened. It was something that happened real early in the life of Datto, where Austin started the company, and I think he was 26 or 27 when the big Hurricane Sandy, hit the northeastern region, part of the United States. And as you know, hurricanes just don't come up to New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. They just don't. They don't. And then all of a sudden, we're in the middle of a hurricane. And Datto as an office was in the middle of this hurricane. It wasn't just us watching remotely over CNN or anything. Like we literally were right in the middle of it. And it was at that particular point, we're still a very small organization at that point. It was at that point we realized, wow, people are actually relying on this. People are relying on this for their livelihoods. The MSPs, the end users, they need this stuff. So, for us also going through something along those lines in our early days, being tested like that, fortunately passing the test, but at the same time realizing at such a young age how critical this stuff really is. Now, all of a sudden, as we're growing in every sales class we go through, every orientation we do for our techs, every developer we bring on stage, we go through that experience with them and start them to realize that, yeah, it's just data, and yeah, it's the IT industry, and yeah, whatever. But when you actually take that, a piece of data and relate it back to how important it is down the line, not only to the MSP, but to the ultimate business owner and every employee that works for that business owner. And when you really kind of humanize it and what that 441 petabytes means, you tend to hold it a little closer to your chest. You tend to take it a little bit more seriously. And I think that's where, just as a result of a few things that happened in our early days that kind of came to fruition for us.
And being an international company, obviously you've got a lot of different standards, compliance standards to deal with, including some of the new ones as well. I would imagine that you're getting a lot of partner questions because they're getting smarter and more savvy on the things that they need to address to make sure that, hey, if they're working with Datto, how is our Datto locked down? How is our clients' data locked down? And those whole processes behind it. How, on the security side, who's in charge of the security team for you? Can you tell us a little about what goes on making sure that all of those things are happening on a daily basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, it's a double-edged sword because for as much of compliance and you got to fall in line and you got to make sure that everything is compliant, and then dealing with all the different compliance laws throughout the world. Because it's not just, it's not just worrying about the United States. Like when we're in smaller markets, like I was just in South Africa and learned all about the South African laws, those kinds of ideas. Those are the kinds of things that you need to be really, really on top of. So for us, it's a huge moneymaker because backup, disaster recovery, data protection, data security is all part of that stack. So for us, it's been a massive win But it's also for us been a massive, we also need to take care of our own house because we are responsible for all this. So, as much as it's been good and bad, it all works out very, very positive for us in the wash. And that translates down to the MSP community because, again, as much as MSPs, don't necessarily want the burden or the have to stay on top of compliance, it's such a massive opportunity for money making. For us, we actually, a couple of years ago, hired on a gentleman by the name of Ryan Weeks. He's our CISO, our Chief Information Security Officer, and comes with a ton of security background. And what's funny is, he's a good one when he comes in and his first day at the organization, he goes, we have a lot of work to do, as opposed to coming in going, wow, this is awesome. And, free lunch today, that kind of stuff. No, he's like, holy crap, we got a ton of work to do. And we're very proud at the progress that we've made all around the world on security compliance, and not just on our own stuff, but helping bring that education to the partners and helping the partners feel safe and secure when they go and talk about it with their ultimate end users.
Makes sense. That's the type of education and conversations that MSPs are having with their customers too. So I would imagine that talking about those best practices and issues that come up can benefit the entire channel. So your CEO, Austin McCord, highlighted the merging of Datto and Autotask technologies at the conference, but he also emphasized that your focus involves an open and broad product portfolio built exclusively for MSPs. So what is Datto doing to ensure that agnostic collaborative environment remains strong? It always sounds good, but what are you putting behind it to make sure that you're following through on Austin's commitment?
Well, I think there's a couple different things. And when you look at the two organizations and we kind of put it together, you've got two very distinct organizations where Autotask tended to be more of a sell-to product. That's the pane of glass that the MSPs would use to manage their day-to-day, whereas the Datto product is a sell-through product, meaning the MSPs are taking it, adding margin, and going and performing services around it, and that's how they're making money. So the key difference and where we've kind of focused our energies is where the commonalities are, which is the fact that these are tools that all MSPs use, whether it's a sell-to or sell-through, whether it's they use it in-house or whether they're making money off of it. So the integrations, the hooks, and everything else that goes along with that is super important. And when we look at the PSA, which is the Autotask, legacy Autotask product and RMM, we're coming at it from a completely Datto perspective, which is looking at it with fresh eyes, which is looking at it from why are things done the way they are? And there's a couple cool things that are happening. And when you talk to the MSP community, no one's really madly in love with their PSA or madly in love with their RMM. They'll tell you, yeah, it's good, but I wish it did this or I wish it didn't do that. And for us, that's never been acceptable at Datto. If you're ever used our products around the backup, the SaaS protection, the networking, we're always striving to make it better, faster, cheaper, sexier, more whistles and bells, more differentiators for the MSP. And that's been really critical for us. But why haven't the PSA and RMM markets responded that way? And I think this is where our opportunity is there's no sacred cows. Like, we're coming at it with fresh eyes. And the better part about it is we have more money to actually spend on this. And I'll give you a perfect example, Brian. We actually hired 100 additional engineers to work on PSA and RMM in the first 3 months since the acquisition. That's 100 additional people working on PSA and RMM. Like, that is more than what Autotask had prior to the acquisition. That we're going to have 4 major releases every year. That's what Austin said on stage at DattoCon. So that they being the MSPs, are going to see continual growth and movement in this actual product. Because, to be honest, and again, this is my opinion, and I come from the RMM world, Brian, you know me, you come from the PSA world, so you could probably back me up on this. There hasn't been a ton of innovation. There hasn't been a ton of movement. It's all been focused around their sales and marketing programs and how do we get MSPs to switch, as opposed to how do we make our products better, faster, sexier, and cheaper, so that the MSPs will be the ones that win at the end of the day. So that's kind of where we're focusing our energy, our efforts. We're super excited about it. Just even some of the initial releases that Austin did at DattoCon are things where Autotask partners were telling us that they actually have requested decades ago, and now they're finally starting to see movement on it. So that, for me, is where, I think the big win, the big opportunity, and, worst case scenario, we're going to push the entire industry forward. We're going to make them serve the MSP market better. We're going to have them have better, stronger roadmaps and really invest in making this technology solid.
And that's always the hard part, because when you have limited resources, you prioritizing what roadmap you should follow, what features need to be added. That's a continual process, especially with the PSA, as you alluded to. I've experienced in that market. The list can be really long because no two MSPs businesses are the same. Their client needs are totally different. What works really well for one may not for the other. So you have obviously a lot of things for your development team to be working on at any point in time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So at the IOTA event in Chicago this month, this is kind of similar along that same front, but one of the speakers, and I'll leave him nameless, but you probably know who it is, suggested MSP should be focusing more on the full feature set of the products and services they add, especially when it comes to security products, rather than figuring out which ones integrate best with their existing tool sets. PSAs and RMMs in particular are a good example. So in your opinion, does the industry put too much importance on the interoperability of the tools, or are we doing the right things? What are your thoughts?
All right. So I'm going to come at it from a different angle. I do agree, by the way. At the end of the day, what you need to do as an MSP is you need to find the right products and services that are best suited towards what your customers' needs are. And if you see a better product and sell them something different, then ultimately that's on you, because what you've done is you've exposed yourself to potentially somebody else coming in and offering something more relevant, more specific to what your ultimate end user's needs are. And I think we'd all agree with that. Okay. Right. That being said, I do agree, but I also think that this is where the MSP needs to hold their vendors more accountable and say, no. This is the route that I'm going. These are the vendors I'm choosing with. You need to integrate with these vendors, or I'll find somebody that will. And I think that there is still that opportunity for the MSP and that power within the MSP voice to be able to go to their vendors and go, this is super important for us, and we need you to pay attention to it. And if you're not going to, I'll find somebody that will. So it's kind of this, don't necessarily look for who your vendors integrate with. Go find the tools and make your vendors integrate with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of having the input on other roadmaps in addition to the ones you like, picking the tools that work best for your specific customers, going back to that previous discussion. The strongest tool set, and then making the links work. And that was, driving force when I was working with a PSA vendor previously. That was kind of my role, is taking all that input and dialing it down for the development team to figure out what are the strongest priorities. And the loudest MSPs were the ones that typically rose to the top of, here's the project we need to work on next. A little easier when you have open APIs now, but still it's the information being transferred that most want to make sure, the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, making sure that information crosses over. So your team, oh, go ahead.
No, sorry, I'm agreeing with you.
Okay. So your team also emphasized a number of platform and product updates at DattoCon, without being promotional, but you had rapid rollback, advanced backup verification, enhanced Autotask integration, RMM 6.0, new access points and switches, improvements to the Datto networking appliance, direct-to-cloud file sync and sharing. That list is much longer than that, but for the sake of time, I'll cut it off at that point. So as I read through all the details, it's obvious the development team at Datto has been quite busy the past few months. So briefly, what do MSPs need to know about all of this massive list of updates that you provided?
Okay, so there's a couple different things. And again, I don't want to go into pitchiness or anything like that. When we're looking at four particular segments of our business. Number one is backup and data protection. A lot of what we did there was not anything necessarily new with our existing products, but what we did there was we made the restore process easier, faster, better, sexier, without a price increase. That's in essence what the rapid rollback actually does. It allows you to actually recover much, much faster. And our whole goal is to eliminate the downtime. And that's been kind of our goal since day one, is eliminate that downtime, make that whole restore process better, faster, quicker. And the announcements that we had at DattoCon around that are definitely that. The big one around the backup space that we actually launched is a direct-to-cloud backup. We think that we've actually found it. It's in beta right now. We invited our DattoCon attendees, and more than 500 MSPs now have signed up for our beta for direct-to-cloud. And actually, I've just got an update this morning. It's phenomenal, the amount of feedback that's actually rolling in. So we'll be out of beta on the direct-to-cloud very, very shortly with that, and very, very comfortable that we can add that to the stack. And it's a real nice alternative for roaming laptops, for smaller environments. It's a nice alternative to file sync and share, those kinds of things where people are kind of using tools to do backups and recoveries simply because of the price point. And I think this kind of solves that sweet spot. At least the feedback we're getting so far has been phenomenal. When you look at the Autotask PSA, and we've rebranded the RMM as Datto RMM, for us, again, it's all about open ecosystem, integrating with all the different tools that everybody's using, so that you've got that, it's kind of single pane of glass, very, very easy to work with product. A lot of enhancements around mobility and being able to track and use mobility, meaning more so of apps where you can actually manage your PSA solution through your smartphone. Same thing goes on the networking side. That's the third chunk, is our networking piece, where we actually extended lifetime warranty to all of our products, access points and switches, for everything that's out there existing in the fleet, everything that's new. And again, trying to really build and continue to build momentum on our networking piece, which is built for MSP networking. And then, the fourth part is just kind of unifying it all together and creating that single pane of glass experience for all MSPs, make everything easier and just simple to engage. Everything an MSP wants, 24/7, 365, direct to tech, US-based support, hidden prices from end users, so you dictate your own margins, give me more whistles and bells, make me feel better about it, make it faster, and don't charge me more. And that's kind of what our MO has been. And I think that's what we accomplished quite a bit of at DattoCon.
Right. Now, your platform, you mentioned, is ever expanding. As we've seen with a couple of vendors in the space as they continue to add and build offerings for MSPs. But how do you prioritizing your product roadmaps with so many different, say, features or products to deliver through the channel or for the channel?
It's a message that I've been trying to get out and since the beginning, because Datto, again, has been a small business, one-man shop turned into multi-billion-dollar company practically overnight. It's been a wonderful success story, and I'm very, very privileged that I've been part of most of that ride. Then private equity comes in, and in our space, Brian, you know this, and this goes back years and years. Like the MSP channel, because we service the small medium market, we tend to be the redheaded stepchild of the IT industry. Right. It's not the big IBM projects. It's not the massive enterprise opportunities that vendors are going to take direct. We've kind of been in our space. And, one of the things about this is, like, we have had awesome technologies come through the MSP space. MSPs have been really loyal buying into this company. This company's been very loyal, handing things back, and partner programs and supporting our customers, MDF and all that. And then big bad billion-dollar company comes in and buys them and then starts selling them direct, or takes them up market to enterprise, or private equity comes in and turns it away from a channel community to a money-making machine. And historically we've seen that. I can, and I'm sure you can name a dozen examples of where good technologies have gone to die somewhere else because it's more profitable selling it direct or selling it to enterprise. That's not the case here. And it's not the situation that the managed services market is in now. The biggest growth opportunity, and every forecaster is saying it right now, is going to be in the SMB outsourced IT space. And that is for managed service providers. And that's not just in the US market, that's extending to every first world market that we're actually going into. And that's what we have kind of hitched our wagon to is MSP specifically. So when you see, and you're asking, how are we going to keep up on development cycles? How are we going to make sure that we keep this technology going with the MSP in mind? We are still just 100% MSP focused. We're not taking our product to the enterprise market. We're not going to start selling our product directly. We're focused on SMB because of this shooting star that we've actually discovered. And now the private equity and venture capitalists are all starting to discover. And that for us has given us a lot more money, which gives us a lot more ability to hire people, which gives us a lot more ability to develop faster and better than anyone else in this market. Again, with the MSP solely focused in our sites. And, how are we going to keep up? That's how we're going to keep up, is that this market has just a massive, massive upside coming in the next 3-4 years. And we're going to take full advantage of that. And that's going to come through developing great product and delivering great service.
Excellent. Are you getting, I would imagine you're getting a ton of feedback from your partners too on areas to improve and things that they need within their business that get worked into the roadmap?
Yeah, it's absolutely key, especially on the PSA RMM side. You got to listen to your partners. And I think one of the things that we actually really love, and I'll give you the direct to cloud stuff as an example. We have Slack rooms, we've got our forum. Somebody will say, like a partner will go, I kind of wish it did this. I kind of wish this wasn't green. I wish it was blue. Something that's not really significant, but kind of makes sense. And then all of a sudden, a day later, it's blue. And that's the stuff that for us at Datto, the engineers freaking love doing that, where we kind of, I wish this was blue. I get it. It's not that important. Get to it when you get to it. And then all of a sudden tomorrow it's blue, and that's the kind of stuff where it's just like when the partner goes, holy cow, they're actually listening. That's the stuff that really gets us excited. So we try to turn on this stuff on a dime. I know Austin himself, if you emailed or called Austin and said, I really hate this part about your product, and if he agrees with you, he himself will go and change it, because he's one of the best coders that we have at Datto. So that's the stuff that's really cool. And I think that's where the MSP community's kind of rallied around us.
That makes sense. Now, the one area, I remember Austin, the whole story, everybody started in the basement, built from the ground up, like many MSPs. I mean, Austin started from simple roots, built it, and has had one focus over the years. But it was business continuity at first. Everybody's aware of the Autotask integration that's happened over the last few months. But the one thing that kind of gets lost in between is Datto's been building its presence in the wireless network protection space over the past year and a half as well, especially the acquisition of Open Mesh. So I wanted to explore that a little bit before we finish up today. So based on your experience, how secure are SMB's wireless networks? Let's kind of hit the basis of
they're not. They're not at all. Come on, seriously? No, they're not at all. There's massive, massive issues. And again, we're recognizing that this is the biggest opportunity for the channel. And it's something that needs, and even ourselves, we need a ton more development and work on this. But the key is that you've recognized it, and what are you doing for it? So, sorry, go on.
No, I was.
I thought your question was funny.
I was drawn to Dave Siebert's comments in CRN. I was reading through magazines last week, and for those that don't know Dave, he's a CIO of IT Innovators, which is a California-based MSP. But in the article, he mentioned how Datto's integration of open mesh technologies now gives MSPs remote access and monitoring capabilities that they hadn't had before. So, which makes sense. It kind of ties in with what we were talking about before, is focusing on MSPs, and a lot of the tools that were available previously or outside of the general channel aren't necessarily built for providers themselves. So what other advantages does the acquisition and the solutions you're providing create for MSPs?
Well, again, and I hate to keep harping on this, but these things take time, they take money, they take engineering talent. So when you look at the vendors that are focused on the SMB space, focused on the MSP, who are the ones that are going to be able to develop and actually be able to accomplish those types of things? And there's very few. When you look at the large Cisco's of the market, as an example, or the WatchGuards, or who are the big guys in the actual market, they're definitely working towards it. Sophos is doing some phenomenal things around security, but are they? And I'm not suggesting Sophos is in that group because they do a great job in the SMB space, but are the rest of them focused on SMB? And if they're not focused on SMB, are they actually focused on MSP? And what is the advantage to the MSP? Are they communicating with the MSP? Are we giving the MSPs enough tools to be able to communicate that to the end users? That's where you start looking at all this and wondering, do I just hash this stuff together? Or do I actually get really strategic with it? And I think that's where we've got a massive opportunity and potentially a big win.
Right. I think in the
but Dave was absolutely right in that article.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think for the IOTA members and audience, it's kind of that crucial factors. It's not always thought of. Sometimes it's thought of as, it's covered, but are you using solutions that really are built for those particular size businesses to address their particular needs and is flexible? because they may not have
absolutely
employees. So that's so between DattoCon and a host of other events, Rob, I'd have to say you're probably the most conversed person with MSPs. I only say that because I know that you're on the road, it seems like 24/7. So you're a good person to go to as a resource to figure out what the buzz is going on. So what are you hearing from the community about cybersecurity? Anything new, new trends or issues rising to the front on the IT security space?
There's actually something I'm watching very, very closely, and I'll give you credit for this, Brian, because it's your organization that gave me kind of the first look at this and kind of made me start thinking about it. It's this whole, we talked about Kevin earlier. We just had Robert Herjavec on stage at DattoCon. These are MSSPs. These are guys that have been focused in building their careers around MSSP.
Right.
And that not selling other managed services, but exclusively security. And I'm talking about security to the point where they are taking on liability around compliance and really being strategic in that sense. So then the question comes, and this is what I'm watching, and I don't have an answer for it. So, I'm sorry if I'm getting there, but I'm kind of watching it, is what's the role of the MSP in here? Like, should we all be focused on migrating towards MSSP? Should we be focused on migrating towards part of MSSP? Should we just stay far away from it and completely outsource to the experts that are in there? Find a good MSSP partner that you can partner up with where they're not going to infringe into your territory and you're going to consult with them or add value to your customers by bringing them into the conversations. So this is where, I don't have the answers. This is where my thoughts are kind of spinning right now, Brian. And this is where I think through a lot of what you guys are doing, a lot of education, a lot of just talking about this is when and how is this all going to look in the future? And again, I don't quite have an answer yet. My gut's leaning towards find a good, strong partner because I think there's just too much at risk. Yeah. And managed services as an MSP, forget about security, is not going away. It's not shrinking. We don't need to reinvent ourselves. We don't need to pivot. But there are ways where we can add value from a security perspective without taking on the liability of risk. And that's kind of where I'm leaning. But those are kind of the conversations that are floating through my head. And those are the super interesting conversations that I have at 10 o'clock at night at a bar at a trade show.
And it's a good point because I don't think there really is a perfect answer for that. One of the things that I heard on, I'm trying to remember which panel discussion we had, is it's the reality, just like managed services, it comes down to what do you need to best support each particular client? And that's different for each MSP. If you're in the Midwest and businesses are very sparse and few between, you probably will need to be more of the generalist and for certain things bring in the specialist. But if you're in a large city and you have an opportunity to provide security services others can't, it might make the most sense to build an advanced security business even and walk away from managed services. We're seeing that in some cases, but yeah. I think overall it's kind of a mix between is what does the client need, not just to be compliant, but to stay in business from a security perspective, and what's it going to take your business to do it financially for the best overall outcome for the customer, and that varies. It'll be different things for different people. And
to be honest, and you guys were one of the first ones to actually start having this conversation publicly. It's still very much a relevant conversation, and at every event that I go to, especially yours, these are the conversations we're still having. So completely relevant questions that anybody that says they have the answer to right now, I think is faulty. Because I think we just all have to just keep asking those questions and keep looking for ways to do it. And even just, what you guys are doing in the market and a few others are doing in the market is just massive. Education is power. And, that's what we're going to continue to win as long as we stay ahead of this and keep watching this and just keep having these weird and awkward conversations about it.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think to wrap things up, I know we're running close on time and I appreciate everything you share. That's the point of this discussion for our readers too, is I think, normally Rob is a good person to be able to share insight on the industry with the things that are going on without being overly promotional about things. And that's the one thing I love talking to you every time is you're willing to share what you're hearing from others. So time always flies too quickly on these podcasts, but do you have any parting thoughts before we close out today's episode?
Oh, geez, you tapped me here. I've given you pretty much everything, all my blood, sweat, and tears. And like I mentioned, I'm now going to go sit on my boat with my family and enjoy a vacation. So I'm going to turn the brain off for a little bit. But
perfectly fine.
I think we covered quite a bit. And I think it's exciting times in the managed services space. I myself have built my career around MSPs. And I've never been happier personally and professionally ever in my career than I am right now. And I think that's because I get excited about the opportunity that we have within this community and what we're all going to accomplish over the next 3 to 4 years. I think there's going to be a lot of people making a lot of money and doing some absolutely phenomenal things. And just ride the wave.
So many good things coming. So great. Well, on behalf of IOTA, I'd like to thank Rob Rae from Datto for joining us for today's episode. And of course, I'd like to thank those of you who downloaded and or tuned in for this episode too. I encourage you to take a few extra minutes and check out all the great cybersecurity content on the association's website. That's iotssa.com. Have a fantastic and secure day, and be sure to check back in for our next episode of the Secure Connections podcast. And Rob, have a great vacation.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.